Hello, everyone. This is the makeup class for class number 20 in Global Communication 1. Today is the day of the festival. I hope you have a great time. You should watch this video sometime before the beginning of our next class, which is on Wednesday, May the 22nd. So if you're watching this, please watch it through to the end. Attendance will be taken electronically. And there is a participation assignment or activity that I'm putting in at the end. So please stick around for that. Okay, so this is our class 20 lesson. I was going to do it this week, but as you know, this week we don't have class because on Wednesday it was Buddha's birthday and the Buddha's birthday holiday, and today is the festival. So, okay, let's dive into it. I want to start off today's class not by talking about charities, which is the topic for today. It's the second half of our class on charities. I want to give a little bit of feedback on the narrative essay assignments. I have not finished grading all of the essays, but they should be done sometime in the next couple of days, all of them. But I've looked through quite a few of them. And when I look through the essays, not only in our class, but the other classes that I'm teaching this semester, I've noticed a few things that students could benefit from a little bit of feedback on. So I've put together a list here of how to put together a good narrative essay, what you should and shouldn't put in an introduction, a good body paragraph, and a conclusion. And there will be at least one question related to narrative essays on the final exam. So please keep that in mind too. Okay, so let's get started. So a little bit of narrative essay feedback. First of all, when you write a narrative essay, you're not writing a very long piece of work. Like you're not writing a 20-page mini biography or anything. You're writing usually a one-page 250 words, possibly 350. Not a lot, not a lot. You've got a very limited amount of space, and you want to spend most of it actually writing about the main event, the significant happening in your life, whether it is a milestone or a turning point, or maybe it's not a milestone or a turning point, but it's something that you will always remember. It was significant in some way. It sticks in your memory, and it's something that you want to share. Okay, so your introduction should be short. If there's one problem that I've noticed with some students' introductions, it's that it's too long and they put in too much background. There's this balance you have to strike. You don't want too little background. And by the way, that's something that a couple of students have done too. They just started writing about what happened in the video, but they gave me no sense of who the person was or how old they were or where this happened or anything like that. You want to start off a narrative essay with a short introduction that gives me a sense of who you are. I don't need a full mini biography, but I do want to know enough so that I can understand what this essay is about. Let's say this essay takes place when you're a child. You're writing I don't know, about a childhood memory. Well, then you have to tell me that it takes place that when you were a child, and was there anything important that we should know about? Maybe something about your family or where you were living, something so we can understand the significance of the event. In this case, we have two videos, and you're supposed to imagine yourself as one of the characters in one of the videos. In one of the videos, the first one, there are three people. There's a woman and two men, and they're in their 30s or 40s, so they're older. But obviously, one man and one woman are a couple. They have been together. We don't know how long, and there's a friend. Okay, now the woman is obviously very emotionally distraught. She has just found out that her boyfriend, and she probably loves, uh, is getting married to another woman on Saturday. So you can imagine how heartbroken she is. So when he opens the trunk of the car and he pulls out the teddy bear, he approaches her and he says, "Hey, look what I got for my favorite girl." And she hits him across the face. Not with her handbag, by the way. A couple of students said, "Oh, I hit my boyfriend with my handbag." No, it wasn't her handbag. It was her motorcycle helmet. Which is much heavier and much harder than a handbag. If you watch the movie, actually, it breaks his nose and he has to get it reset. But a little bit of background would be necessary. You, at the very least, need to let me know that, let's say, if you decide to be the woman, you want to write from the woman's point of view, you might say how long you have been dating Jack and how you found out that he's going to get married on Saturday. We don't need a lot of information. I don't need to know what high school you went to or what your major was in university or your hobbies or anything like that. The important thing is you've got a boyfriend, you love him, or you're very emotionally attached to him, and you've just found out, or you had found out, that he is getting married to another woman this weekend. You might let me know how many years ago this happened, because remember, narrative essays are talking about memories. So if it happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or just a short time ago, maybe it happened earlier this year, you might want to put that in the essay too. But that's about it. It's a good idea, remember, not only to put in the background, but give us an idea of what you learned from this event. Like you might say, I learned that day I would learn a very painful lesson about love. If you say something like that, it not only gives us the main idea of the essay, and remember, those are the two things you've got to put in the introduction of a narrative essay. I even put that in the quiz, remember? What are the two types of information to put in a narrative essay? You've got to give me some background information, a little bit, so I know what's going to happen, what happened before, and the setup for the main event. But I also need to get an idea of what's the main idea. When I say the main idea, I don't mean tell me everything that happened. I was dating a guy named Jack. I found out that he was going to get married to another woman on Saturday. So I waited for him outside his apartment. And when he arrived with his friend, I smashed him in the face with with my motorcycle helmet, and then I rode away. Don't write that, all of that in the introduction, because that's a spoiler. The main event actually is that few seconds or that minute where the car pulls in and then, she attacks Jack. This is the main thing. Or, in a wider sense, you might say the main event is finding out that the boyfriend is getting married to someone on Saturday, and then the confrontation. Okay, that's at its biggest, that could be the main event. So don't give me too much information. Just give me enough so that I want to continue reading. You want to create tension or curiosity. You want to generate interest in the reader. That's what makes us want to read. If you don't do that, if you just tell me a full summary in the introduction, well, then there's no point really in reading the rest of the essay. The introduction should hook the reader and draw us in, make us want to read the rest. That's what good writing is about. Also, watch out with the details. You don't need too many details in the introduction, just enough so that we can understand the significance of this event. If you don't tell me that Jack is your boyfriend and that you love him, then the main event won't make sense. It's like you just attacked a stranger. So give us just enough to understand, but nothing more. The introduction should be short, and if you put in too many unnecessary details, then the reader will get bored very quickly. And a bored reader is a reader that will close the book or swipe on the screen and then not read anymore. Okay, next. The body of the essay is only going to be 2 or 3 paragraphs. You're not going to be writing very much. So what should you put in each part? Well, you've got a couple things you could do. The easiest thing is just to divide the main event into 2 or 3 parts, and each part will focus on a different part of the main event. Now, depending on the scope, and when I say the scope, I mean, does the main event take place over one day or part of the day or many months? Think of the examples in the textbook. The first example we have is the person who is on a road trip. They've gone to the west coast of the United States, and they get into a car accident. They lose their leg. That's the introduction. That's just the setup. The main event is actually over 10 months or 12 months, where the person learns to walk again. They get an artificial leg, and they join this group called Achilles International, and they start training for a marathon. And they come to the conclusion that although they've lost their leg, they are still the same person inside, and they regain a sense of confidence, a sense of self, a sense of self-worth. And that's the main event. That takes place over about a year. So each paragraph takes place in a different part of that year. And there are time expressions that help show that passage of time. If I just quickly take a look in the textbook here, if I need to, there actually is a grammar, not a grammar point, there's a language point here that talks about time phrases, and it's quite good. We'll have it there. Rise and edit. Shifting between time frames, we've got that on page 126, switching from the simple past to the past perfect. But I was pretty sure there was another one here about time frames. Was there not? Okay, looks like I'm going to be proven a liar here. A referent? No, that's not it either. Clown of my life. Okay. Clown of my life, we've done that. Restate, we did that. Using the dictionary to find the correct meaning. Over the next few months. Narrative essay. Where was it? There is edit. Okay. I'm sure that was in that. Okay. It's a good idea to take a look at how an essay will use certain expressions in order to show the passage of time. A few months later, after a few weeks, the next winter, to show that this main event is taking place over a longer period of time. The second narrative essay that we looked at in the textbook is about a man or woman, I guess, who stays at home during a storm, and then after the storm, they go out. The neighborhood is flooded. Everything is covered with water, and they go in a little boat and they rescue their neighbor's family. This is a main event that takes place over part of a day. If you think the introduction talks about the storm, and then the body of the essay, the main event, is just about after the storm has finished and the neighborhood is flooded, and what happens then. The person realizes that their basement is flooded, they get the boat, and then they go out and they save their neighbor and their neighbor's family. In that case, the main event takes place over a much shorter period of time. Each paragraph should tell us something different about that main event. Remember, the body only focuses on the main event. Don't talk about memories or anything from the person's past. You're just focused on that main event. Anything that happened before the main event or after the main event, don't worry about it. I want to know, what is the significant memory, whether it's a turning point, a milestone, or just some important moment in a person's life, a time when they learned a very important life lesson, for example. What did they learn? Well, that comes in the conclusion. Tell me what the event was. Okay, don't include too many unrelated events that might slow down the story. Once again, narrative essays aren't very long. They're not big autobiographies, so stick to the basic details. Okay, but don't forget to include some descriptive language. I mean, I really want to get a sense of what you experienced. For example, in the second video where the boys are walking along the railroad tracks, there's a moment before the train comes around the corner. Oh, hold on, what happened there? There's a moment where the train comes around the corner and they just, oh, what happened there? There's a moment where they, hold on just a moment here. We are recording. We're live, ladies and gentlemen, and I don't edit. Oh, what happened here? Well, let's try this again. Okay, there we go. Odd. For some reason, the screen just blanked out there. All right. Sorry about that, everybody. Just a little bit of technical difficulty. All right, so in the second video where the boys are walking along the train track, right? Okay, they're walking along the train track, and one of the boys kneels down and he puts his hand on the railroad track. And he can feel a little bit of vibration in that train track. And that's what makes him suddenly turn around. And that's when he looks back and he sees the smoke from the steam engine as it's coming around the corner, and he screams out, "Train!" That sort of detail is really good to include. Tell me what maybe the person was thinking, what they were feeling, what they saw, what they heard, what they smelled, what they tasted. Sensory language is really, really good. Not too much, but enough so that we can experience the event just like the narrator did. Okay, so you've told me the main event, and we're almost over. Time to finish the essay, right? Yes, but not quite yet. You've got to give me the conclusion. And this is very similar to the introduction. Remember, introduction short, the longest part of the essay is the body, and now we want a short conclusion. It should be clear, concrete, and concise. Just one paragraph, not too long. Tell me maybe one or two sentences about what happened after the event, maybe how the incident influenced your life, like what did you learn from it, or how did it become a turning point, or what made this a significant event? Did you learn something about yourself from this experience? Don't include any new ideas or events. This is just like any other conclusion for any other type of essay. It's just wrapping up what you've already talked about. Don't put in any new or unrelated information. Tell me a little bit about what happened after the main event. How did that main event affect you, or what did you learn from that main event? And then that's basically it. Maybe a final thought, and then we're done. Okay, here's also a little bit of general advice that I have for students. Very quickly, simple is better. And that's so important. I think I'll say it again. Simple is better. When you write an essay, don't think that you have to use complicated vocabulary or difficult sentence structure. You don't. Simple is better. Professors do not read, long, complicated sentences and that are filled with really flowery language, very poetic words and unusual phrases, and think, wow, this student is a great writer. We just think that the student is trying too hard to sound smart. Or in the case of a student who is not a native speaker of English, using high-level English can be suspicious. Let me talk a little bit more. Sometimes I read students' work and I just think to myself, this student didn't write this. I don't believe it. Especially if I know the student's name and I've heard the student talk, so I have a very good sense of what level the student's English is at. And I have maybe some handwriting. Sometimes we do those handwriting exercises in class where you write a paragraph for some sort of project and then you will hand it in, or the introductory survey that I had everybody complete at the beginning of the semester. Remember, day 1. If I have an essay from a student who's 20 years old and is maybe a mid-intermediate level at best, and they submit an essay that is written in English in the style of a 35-year-old native speaker, that is extremely suspicious. It makes me think one of two things. Number one, the student just wrote it in Korean, and then they used some kind of translation application to translate it. Although usually if it's Naver Translate or something, it's not high quality writing. It's just garbled and really confusing. Naver Translate is its own problem. These days, ChatGPT is the big issue, and I can understand the temptation of students to use ChatGPT because you can go on ChatGPT and you can put in a few prompts and just say, please write an essay about this, and then that your homework's done. I think this is bad for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're not actually doing the work. The homework gets done, but you don't get any value from it. It's sort of like going to the gym and exercising, and somebody is holding the weights for you and helping you pick them up. You're not going to develop any genuine strength by doing that at all. And I'm very worried for the next generation that are growing up where that kind of technology is inside their phone, inside their pocket 24 hours a day. I'm very worried about that. But as a student, if you use ChatGPT and then you turn in your homework, here's the thing, I'll know that it's not you. I'll know very clearly that you've probably used this translation application. There are many times where, especially the last 12 months, where I've looked at students' writing and I looked at particular pieces of vocabulary or certain sentences, and I thought, you not only did you not write that, I'm certain that the student didn't write it, but I also, and I've done this on one occasion, sat down with the students and I've underlined the sentence, I've printed it and I've shown the student and said, what does that mean? You wrote that sentence, right? What does that mean? Why did you choose that particular expression? And the student didn't even know what it meant. So if I was to give my perfect advice, it would be to avoid this sort of technology, because I think it's going to have an extremely negative effect on students' development. But if you are going to use this technology, and I am still not sold on this idea, but if you do use something like ChatGPT, here's a piece of advice. If you use it as a first draft. ChatGPT can be useful for producing a first draft, something that you can work with. Okay, you need to write an essay about something. You tell ChatGPT to do it. Boom, ChatGPT will produce a piece of writing for you. I would say go through it and then heavily edit it. And I mean, if you see words or expressions that you're not very familiar with, take them out. Make the writing your own. Don't just say, well, ChatGPT wrote it, and therefore I'll submit it to the professor. I don't know what other professors will do, but I don't want to accept that kind of work. It's one thing to be kind of lazy and use something like ChatGPT, but it's even worse if you're not even going to take the ChatGPT or the Naver Translate or something and then try and make it your own. If you use technology to create a first draft, go through, and if there's a word or expression that you normally wouldn't use, take it out and put in your own. And that, I think, is hopefully what will happen with this technology as time goes on. People will use it to generate a first draft, and then you got to go in, and then you've got to make it your own. Don't just simply use this AI to make your homework and then turn it in. Because I think not only are you trying to cheat the professor, but you're also cheating yourself out of a good education. Okay, I think I've talked enough about that. Sorry for boring you. All right, so one last thing. Please watch out for words underlined in red and blue. If you ever submit any homework that uses on Microsoft Word, if you see a word underlined in red, that means it's misspelled. And that means when I open up the file, I can see your spelling mistakes right away, so don't leave them. Also, if you have a word or part of a sentence that is underlined in blue, that means there is some error. Maybe there's an extra space, or maybe there's a problem with the noun-verb agreement, or perhaps a different words should be used. Maybe there's a tense problem. Whatever it is, check it out, because you really don't want to leave your homework that is filled with words and parts of sentences that are underlined in red and blue. You're guaranteed to get a lower mark because all of your mistakes are underlined. Okay, so there's my general advice for you, and I hope some of this you found useful. All right, so really quickly, a little bit about how you can talk about charities. Let's go back to our last class. You might remember the first question I asked everyone was, have you ever donated to charity? Or how often do you donate to charity? Do you, if you don't donate to charity, then why don't you? And here are some ways you can express your preference or non-preference towards charities. You could say, I sometimes donate money to charity, talking about adverbs of frequency here. You know, I sometimes donate to charity. I often donate to charity. I donate once a month. I donate once a year. I donate once in a blue moon. Maybe you donated in the past, but you haven't donated for a long time and you have no plans to donate in the future. In that case, you could say, I used to donate money to charity. If you've never donated, then you would just say, I have never donated money to charity, not even once. I don't think we looked at this question, but I put it in anyway. A good question regarding charities is not on the individual level, but the national level. Do rich countries, for example, do rich countries have an obligation or a moral responsibility to help less developed countries? You know, should rich countries help poor countries? Especially in view of the history in which some rich countries exploited poor countries in the past. And in some cases, not just in the past, but you could argue in the present too. Okay, so you could say, I think rich countries have a responsibility to help less developed countries, or I don't think rich countries have a responsibility to help less developed countries. One question which I think is really interesting is, when I think of the Korean case, if you look at Korea in the 1950s and the 1960s, and even in the 1970s, Korea received millions and millions of dollars in international aid, much of it from the United States. And if you look at how poor Korea was during those decades, it really is amazing to see how well that Korea's economy developed. It's called the miracle of the Han River. Now, back in the 1960s, I think it was the early or mid 1960s, the United States government did a study of these different economies in Asia, and Japan was already starting to develop its economy at that point. The United States was very interested in predicting what country would be the most economically developed country in Asia. I think they already assumed that Japan was going to be developing quite well, but they're wondering, besides Japan, which Asian country was going to be like the next big thing, or which poor Asian country had the best chance of becoming rich. And I believe the country that they chose at the top of the list was the Philippines, and it was because of their history with the United States, their ability to speak English, probably something to do with the ruling elites' relationships with the United States, whatever it was. Anyway, that prediction turned out to be very, very wrong, especially considering that South Korea, I think, was at the bottom of the list. They considered Korea to be to have very, very little hope of developing economically. And that is obviously not how things turned out. Korea was able to transition from a country that was dependent on foreign aid, donations of money and resources and low interest loans, into a donor country. Now, Korea is a rich country and it donates money to other countries. And this is a relatively rare thing, to transition from being a poor country dependent on aid to a rich country that is now donating to other countries. You can imagine at some point in the 80s and 90s, the leaders in Korea must have had like this weird feeling where like, wait, what? You're not going to give us money anymore to help us develop our economy? What? We're supposed to now start donating to other people? Like that must have been such a foreign concept at the time, because they were so used to having been receiving aid. That really is a rare transition for a country to go from being a poor country dependent on aid to being a rich country that becomes a donor nation. My question would be, which country do you think will transition next? Is there a country now that is quite poor, and is dependent on international aid, foreign donations? What country will transition from being a poor country, like South Korea was, to being a rich country in the future? I don't know the answer to that question, but I'd be very interested to hear some of your ideas. Okay, anyway, I think I'm rambling here. One of the downsides of doing a Zoom class is that there's nobody else around, so I'm just here talking to you, which is another way of saying talking to myself. Let's get on with today's lesson. So in our last class, we talked about charities, which I will review here. A charity is an organization that is set up to provide help and raise money for people who need help or a particular cause. So it is not an organization that is motivated by profit. It is an altruistic organization. Its ambition is to help in some way. You've got environmental causes, saving the whales, protecting the rainforest, endangered animals, global warming, cleaning the oceans, anything related to nature or wild animals and the ways in which humans have mistreated the environment. Health charities. There are a lot of charities that seek to get donations for research, into different medical treatments, maybe trying to find a cure or a vaccine for some kind of disease. Other charities are focused on trying to help people in need. Now, sometimes this is very short term, immediate need. There's an earthquake in a country. Houses are destroyed, buildings collapse. There's no food, there's no water. This is emergency disaster relief. Other times, there's no rain for a long time. There's drought, and then all of the crops die. There's no rice, there's no bread, there's no vegetables or fruit or anything. So these countries are suffering from famine. They also need help. Or some charities are focused on more long-term goals like education, clean water technology, or people suffering from various other problems. Landmine victims is a big one as well. Other charities are not so much trying to solve a problem like hunger or disease or the environment, but they want to educate people. They want to raise awareness. There could be any kind of issue in the world that maybe people might not know about, or they might just not be interested about, or maybe they've heard some sort of misinformation and they completely understand what is going on. So charities will sometimes try to organize a kind of public awareness campaign using TV or the internet, and they'll try and educate the public because they think if you can educate people, then they will change their thinking. And if they change their thinking, maybe they will donate to a charity or put pressure on their government to do something. Okay, and now it is time for the participation activity. All right, so you've watched until now, which is almost the end of the lecture. I would like you to do a short participation activity and then upload this to 열린게시판. So go on Cyber Campus, click on 열린게시판, and then just I want you to write a short paragraph and then post it on 열린게시판, just in the little text box there. You don't need to upload a Microsoft Word file. Just type it into the text box, the little message box there, comment box on 열린게시판 on Cyber Campus. Okay, so what I want you to do is, now that we've talked about charities for a bit, I want you to start a new charity. So imagine you have decided to start a new charitable organization. If we had a normal class, I would put you together in groups to do this, but we're on Zoom, so I'm asking you to do it by yourself. So I want you to choose a cause. So maybe it's an environmental cause, a health cause, something related to public awareness, whatever it is. I've given you a number of different examples just a moment ago. Choose a problem in the world or some issue. And then I want you to imagine you have started a new charity to try and solve this problem or raise awareness or gather donations so that you can try and deal with this issue. So first, identify the cause, tell me why it's so important, and then tell me why we should donate money to your organization. Why should people listen to you? Next, tell me about your organization. I mean, what are you going to do with the donations? If I donate money to you, well, what's going to happen to that money? Will it be used well? Will it not be used well? How can I know? How will you try to improve the situation? Whatever cause you choose, how are you going to effect positive change? And then conclude with an emotional appeal. And don't forget to tell me the name of your new organization. So a lot of charities have like a short, catchy name. I'll give you a few examples from previous classes in just a minute. But first, this paragraph, I would like you to use the following example as a model. This next paragraph I wrote myself, and this is a model for you to follow. Okay, so here's an example of a charity pitch. Hello, everyone. I would like to talk to you about a heartbreaking illness. It's called Alzheimer's disease, also known as dementia. It affects 1 in 14 people over the age of 65 and 1 in 6 people over the age of 80. Imagine if your mother or father could not recognize you when they became old. Imagine if you could not recognize your family and friends when you got old. There is no cure, but there is hope. With your donation, we can support important medical research that might one day lead to a cure for this disease. There's research being done right now that is very promising, but they need funding to continue their valuable work. Our organization, A Future to Remember, keeps administrative costs very low so that 80% of your donation can go directly towards the cause. Please donate whatever you can and support a future that everyone will be able to remember. Okay, so what have I got here? I start off the paragraph with hello, everyone, a greeting. You want to say hello before you ask for a donation. Then I talk a little bit about the cause that I've chosen, in this case, Alzheimer's disease. I use language like heartbreaking illness. I also give an alternative name or a synonym for the disease. I say Alzheimer's disease, and then I say also known as dementia. I talk about why it's a big problem, how many people are affected by it. I also make it a little bit personal, imagine if your mother or father, or imagine if you, trying to make people imagine this disease affected their life. And then I mention the real situation. There's no cure, cannot cure Alzheimer's yet, but there is hope. And then I talk about the different medical research that is being done and how it's very promising, but they need money. And then I transition to my organization. And my organization, A Future to Remember, I call it A Future to Remember because it's connected to the issue. Alzheimer's disease, okay, that's when people lose their memory. It's a deterioration of the brain functions. A Future to Remember, so a future when there is no Alzheimer's. And then I talk about why people should donate to my charity. I talk about the low administration costs. And then I finish with an emotional appeal, which is very common in charity pitches, Please donate whatever you can and support a future. My last phrase there, a future that everyone will be able to remember. Once again, this relates to the name of my organization, A Future to Remember, which is related to the cause. It's a nice way of wrapping up the message, and it makes it much more memorable for anyone listening to the charity pitch. And when I say pitch, I mean it's like a sales pitch. It's like a speech that promotes something. Okay, so I would like you to do a paragraph, something similar to this. You can use this as your model. Choose any charity or choose any cause, any problem in the world that you think is interesting, and then write a paragraph. Remember to include a name for your new charity. Don't use a real charity name, make a new one. And I want to show you some examples from some of my previous classes, because last year I had some really good examples. I had one group last year that did a charity for cleaning up the world's oceans. It was called Blue Sea Foundation. I thought that was good. Please don't take this name or this idea. This is just just to inspire you, just an example. So Blue Sea Foundation was one. The next one was for global warming. The global warming can also increase ocean temperatures. And so this was called Red Ocean, and they wanted to get donations to try and reduce the effects of global warming on life and ecosystems in the ocean. Number 3, this is a charity that students made called Together Against Famine. So they wanted to get donations to help countries that suffered from a natural disaster and had no food for their people. A 4th charity was called Whale Vision, which I thought was kind of funny. It was like a Save the Whales charity. You've heard of World Vision? Well, this is Whale Vision. I hope you find that interesting. Number 5, this was a charity called Books for Seniors, and it was about people donating books in order to give senior citizens a wider selection of things to read in their old age, a way of helping old people keep their minds active. And finally, number 6, this was related to stray or abandoned animals. You sometimes see abandoned cats or dogs or something else on the street. Well, this was a charity that was trying to get these animals and find homes for them. So rescue the strays. How could you say no to those cute little faces? Okay, so that's what I'd like you to do. So before our next class on Wednesday, please choose a cause, write a short paragraph that asks for donations for your cause. Don't forget to include the name of your new charity organization, and then put that on 열린게시판 on Cyber Campus. Okay. Oh, one last thing. I think in our last class, can't remember whether I actually put this in our last class. One last thing for homework. I want you to please read the article, Feed Projects, How a Bag Can Feed Children in Many Ways. That's on pages 161 and 162. It's about these sort of eco bags that you can buy, and when you buy one bag, it the money from that bag goes to pay for the lunches of children in poor villages around the world. And also complete exercises B, C, and D on pages 162 and 163 and 164. So that's what I'd like you to do over the weekend before our next class on Wednesday, May the 22nd. I hope you've enjoyed this lecture. So let me just turn that off. Okay, great. So have a great time at the festival, and I will see everybody next week. All right, bye-bye.